back. This is episode 4, part 2, sitting down with my wonderful mother. And I know last time we really talked about, we kind of just really dove into my mother's profession and what she does for her line of work. And what we're going to do today is we're really going to kind of tie that into the whole COVID situation. And what we're going to do is we're really going to kind of banter back and forth and preference what we know about the COVID situation, because we were both in the medical field. Now I'm in the physical therapy field. My mother's a medical technologist. Now, what's the
clinical laboratory scientist.
Clinical laboratory scientist. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the misinformation in some of the things that my mother sees, because she sees it in the most basic, simplistic forms. And so let's kind of dive into that, Mom. So when this whole thing first started, what was your whole take kind of on the whole COVID situation? Where were you at when this all became really an issue?
It's a very interesting question, because initially I will have to admit that I really didn't take it very seriously. I thought that my director in the laboratory was being an alarmist. And, she would update us. We'd have our weekly huddle, and, she was like, this virus is out, and it's only a matter of time before it comes here to South Florida, because we have a lot of cruise ships. We have a lot of people traveling to South Florida. It's only a matter of time. And she said to us specifically, if I was you, you should all go down to Home Depot or whatever and buy a box of masks, because when it hits, all of that stuff is going to be gone. And I thought to myself, this lady's crazy. I thought that, she was just being an alarmist, an extremist, and I was just kind of like, yeah, this is stupid. That very day, when I went home, I called my mother, your grandmother, and, of
course... Shout out to Graham. Graham, I miss you. I love you. Hopefully you're watching my stuff, Graham. I'll put you on the hot seat now.
Anyway, I called her on the phone, and her husband is definitely a high risk patient.
Sure.
And I just told her, what, look, you don't really need to change anything other than focus on washing your hands a lot and don't ever touch your face. Get yourself in the habit now to realize how often you touch your face. And I really thought that would be enough. And I still do think that that's enough. But the general population doesn't do that. We went on the boat this morning with a good friend of ours. And because we were social distance on the boat, it wasn't a big deal.
Right.
But I even pointed out to her, we've been sitting here talking to you and I for about 5 minutes, and you have touched your face probably 50 times. And I said, that's like the kiss of death right there. You can't, you got to stay away from your mucous membranes. You can't, rub your eyes. You can't pick your nose. You can't pick something out of your teeth. You have to just teach yourself to stay away from your face. And as a laboratory professional, that's drilled into us from day one in school, because you're dealing with all kinds of infectious body fluids. So, I'm accustomed to living that way. I do touch my face if I'm stressed out, or, I'll find that one little thing and I'll pick at it or whatever. But, I've been trying to be really, really conscious about that, even at home, to not touch my face. At work, it's not a problem.
Right.
And, people complain about having to wear a mask for the 15 minutes they're at the grocery store. And, I don't know what it's like for you, but for myself, I'm not allowed to walk into the hospital without a mask on. I have to wear a mask for the full 8.5 hours that I'm there. The only time I'm allowed to take it off is when I'm eating. And that's it. So, I'm in a mask all day long, 5 days a week. And, for people to say, like, oh, I don't want to wear a mask. You know what? Wearing a mask is not about me. My wearing a mask is for you.
Exactly.
It's for that person. It's for the cashier at Publix. And again, in the very beginning, I didn't wear a mask out in public.
I didn't
because I just thought, I'm not going to touch anything, I don't have any symptoms, I'm not coughing on anybody.
Right.
It'll be good. And now, like, I have serious regrets about how long it took me to actually take it really seriously outside.
Right.
And, when I started seeing our case numbers go up, and I mean dramatically go up to, an average of 20 patient admissions per day, of really, really ill people.
So that's probably 4 or 5 times per average.
Yeah, and that was, when we opened up, and, I live on the intercoastal, so it's like we see all the boats.
Right.
With the kids, and we have Lake Boca, which is a party spot for boaters. That's where we were this morning. But as it gets crowded, we're out of it.
Right.
So
exactly.
these kids are out there, 15 kids on a boat, and then they're tethering up 10 boats together. So now you've got 150 people that are all hanging out together and drinking and sharing drinks, and the misinformation part that caused that was that young people were not as at risk, which in my experience
is not true.
Is definitely not true. And yes, do pre-existing conditions, comorbidities, did that increase your likelihood of becoming very ill? Yes, it does. But there are healthy people that 16 years old, 18 years old, we had a 32-year-old gentleman who was in the hospital for over 3 months on a ventilator. He was not doing well, and he had no underlying conditions. But it's just, sometimes you just don't, I just touched my face. Sometimes you just don't know, and they didn't know enough at the time to actually pinpoint what put you more at risk than me or the person who lives downstairs or the guy that lives across the hall.
Sure. And I think to kind of tie into what you were saying, Mom, and I'll kind of reference back to where you had first started. For me, and I think for a lot of people, we were all in a similar situation, clearly. Because if we all had taken it serious from the beginning, we wouldn't be in the position that we are now as a country. Right? And not talking necessarily individually, but as a whole, right? And I was similar, because in the medical field, it's a blessing and a curse being in the field that we're in, because we are very informed. We do have a very good medical mind, and we are able to see through the nonsense and get to the meat and bones very easily. But the problem is that also being in the medical field, we're trained to lower the level of fear within an individual at all costs. The last thing we want to do is increase the fear in a patient's mind. We always want to try to limit the amount of fear, have them see clearly, obviously give them the correct information, but do it in a way as to where you're not scaring the person, because fear allows people to not think clearly. It forces them to act out of character. And the thing about it is that I think
backfired.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And again, like you had a reference, being in Florida, I'm honestly surprised from my point of view. I'm surprised it took us to the second spike to be one of the hotbeds in the country. In my personal opinion, if you look at our demographic, who is around us, what our population is per capita, this is bread and butter for a place like this. So for it to take as long as it did to get to as bad as it was, and still is we're not out of the water yet. We're very far from that. I would say is equally impressive as it is confusing. Because you can ask everybody who I talk to, I was getting ready to batten down the hatches very early when this all started. Because if you look at the demographic, you look at the people that are around us, I would say, and this is a generalization, 80% of the people that I would see are great candidates for COVID.
Yeah.
And that's just the unfortunate reality of the situation. And similar to what you had said as well, there's with this whole mask situation, I'm so glad you touched on that, because I'm very similar in that sense. The mask Is it gonna solve your problems? No, it's not. But it's an outward expression that you're doing your part.
Exactly.
You're participating in the health of the country.
It's a small thing to ask.
Right.
For someone to do that, and collectively as a whole, if everyone did, we would be far better than we are. And I do have to say that very rarely do I find anybody in my circle that refuses to wear a mask. I'm very fortunate that way, because I'm not sure how I would actually handle that. If I had a good friend who refused, I don't know that that person would be considered a good friend anymore. Personally, I just think that it's a selfish way to approach a very, very bad situation. And going back to the younger population, people actually in my neighborhood were having COVID parties. John tested positive. Let's all go over to his house, have a party. Kind of like in the old days, like when you were a kid, where like as a parent, Sue has chicken pox. Let's get it out of the way while he's young, and he's not gonna scratch his face off. People did that, and I don't know if people still do that or not. I'm not sure, but definitely. Sure. For me growing up, it was a very common practice that you would take your children and expose them to things. And I think that taking that approach for this virus, especially where we didn't know a whole lot about it, in fact, initially it was considered to be a pneumonia, a respiratory virus, and it's not. It's not a respiratory virus at all, and the damage that is caused to the lungs is because it causes an inflammatory response in your body, and it starts the cytokine cascade. So your body has got this virus, and it attacks you, and your body just goes absolutely haywire. So the lung damage is actually little clots. So your body spontaneously is clotting everywhere. So you're getting clots in your lungs, and that's the first symptom that they saw. Shortness of breath happens from that. So when they started seeing these patients not exactly knowing what was going on, they assumed it was a pneumonia, which is why, we need ventilators, we need ventilators. Well, now we know ventilators are not the answer. The answer is to shut down your inflammatory response. So some people obviously are more prone to having a hyper inflammatory reaction to everything. So those are the ones that tend to get really, really sick.
Right.
And now it's actually progressed, like the patients that are sick enough to be in the hospital and they actually need respirator support by mechanical ventilation. The longer they go on, and if they weren't treating their inflammation, now they're ending up in renal failure. So now not only they are on respirators, but they need dialysis. We don't have enough dialysis machines to bring into an intensive care unit to clean out their blood. So now their kidneys are shot, now their liver is getting shot, and their lungs are shot. So the ones who are lucky enough to actually survive, we don't know the long-term effects that it's going to have on them. And basically the feeling as of late is that the lung damage that's done is irreversible. That'll be forever. So if you have a 23-year-old who has the severe lung damage that we're seeing in the really severe COVID cases, those patients are going to have trouble for the rest of their lives. And we don't know whether or not it's going to cause, what's going to happen when we have a resurgence of it again with the flu? So now these people have damaged lungs. If they get the flu,
they're in trouble.
They're going to be in serious trouble.
Serious trouble.
And, it's going to become, speaking of flu season coming up, we're coming up on flu season.
Yeah.
That's a whole other series of complications as far as the shortage that we have in staffing in the laboratory. It's going to cause even more of a strain. And results are going to get slower and slower and slower because most of the rapid testing that we have can only run one test at a time. So it's a 20-minute incubation to get a test result. So if you break that down into the number of hours per day, how many tests can you do?
Right.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot. So if you have, a backlog of tests, you also, and you touched on it a little bit about, specimen viability, you can actually accidentally exceed the acceptability of a specimen because it's been sitting too long because you couldn't get to it. So I guess the takeaway for me, and I don't know whether or not my career, my profession or industry will run with it, but it's a prime opportunity for us to educate people in what we do and how important. And I was just doing a little bit of research earlier this morning about job vacancy, and I know for myself, I could go anywhere. I could quit my job today, have a job tomorrow. What career allows that flexibility?
It's not many.
Not many. So we have probably an average of 10 to 30% vacancy rate as we sit right now in every single laboratory. And the need for laboratory professionals is increasing at a rate of 17 to 33% per year. The average job growth for any other profession in the United States is a 7% growth rate. And that's for a profession that's growing. Obviously, there are some professions that are dying out. There's less need for them. My profession, there's a demand, there's a need, but there aren't people actually, they don't know about it. They don't know what it is. So there is some hope in that a lot of the schools, middle schools, grade schools, high schools are starting to emphasize STEM education: science, engineering, technology, and mathematics. So it's an avenue for us to get our foot in the door to educate young people that this is a viable career, it's a viable profession, that most people go to college, by the time they're ready to graduate, they're worried whether or not they're going to get a job in their major.
Right.
And most people actually have to settle for something outside their major that's similar, that they're sort of qualified for. I can guarantee 100% somebody graduates from a clinical laboratory science university program, they will be recruited before they even graduate and have a job, before they walk down the aisle to get their diploma. And that's a very rare situation.
Right.
It's an empowering situation.
And just to kind of specify for you guys, my mom isn't talking about leaving her job today and getting another job down the street. She can go anywhere in the world.
That's true.
In the world. And keep in mind, when we had left Connecticut, you were getting job offers in California, in the Midwest,
Arizona,
in Key West, Arizona, Florida. You were thinking about going to, what was it? Were you thinking about going to Europe for a little while there?
Not seriously, no.
But that was on the table.
But it is definitely a possibility, because we're considered a critical shortage position. So, you can get work visas for any country because they're in the same situation as we are. So, and there's also the possibility to travel, to be a traveler and, just take short-term assignments, fill in positions, and see the country, which is also, a nice alternative for somebody just coming right out of school.
Right. And alrighty, guys, we're gonna shut off part 2 of episode 4 here. Again, here with my mom, and we'll be back with a part 3 where we're really gonna talk about, we're gonna kind of tie together those first 2 topics, COVID and my mom's line of work. We're going to talk about a couple numerical values and kind of dive a little bit deeper in terms of the vacancy, how you can get educated, some options, some outlets that you can look at if this is something that interests you. And then we're going to kind of leave you with just some final takeaways of just what our perception is of the whole situation and what we believe we can do as a country to continue to take steps forward in the future to progress and to progress the right way so this doesn't happen again. So again, thank you guys so much for checking in. We appreciate it. And we'll see you guys in part 3 of episode 4. See you later, guys. Peace. You're gonna see a couple boxes in a little circle. So over here, this is gonna be a playlist with a whole bunch of other videos that I posted. If you like what you saw so far from the sit down, you'll be able to keep up with everything right there. Right here is gonna be the video to my previous video. And then right here, click that circle there. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that bell icon to make sure you get all the updates whenever I come out with some new content. I appreciate the support. Let's keep the train going. Here we go.